Gemini 3.6 Flash costs half what Kimi K3 costs. $1.50 per million input tokens versus 3.00, and Moonshot AI hasn't published almost anything to show Kimi K3 actually beats it. So I went through publicly available data, verified sources, no vendor money, comparing Gemini 3.6 versus Kimi K3 across 5 real tests: context window, multilingual support, real-time info, speed, and pricing. You're going to want to see what Kimi K3 actually shows up with. And if you're paying for Kimi K3 right now, there's a real chance you're spending double without knowing what you're actually getting for it, because the pricing gap alone could change your whole API budget. Alright, so who's this actually for? Developers and product teams picking an API for a real app. This one's for you. Choosing the wrong model doesn't just cost you quality, it can literally double your token bill, and if you can't even find published specs for one of them, that's a problem before you write a single line of code. Test 1. Context window and long document handling. You feed in a massive doc, a full codebase, or a long legal file, and the model just cuts it off. So you get truncated output, missing context, wrong answers, and you don't always know it happened until something breaks downstream. Okay, so both models claim a 1 million token context window, so on input size they're the same. But Gemini 3.6 publishes a max output of 65,536 tokens, and Kimi K3 has no published figure for that output limit anywhere I could find, which is kind of a significant thing to leave out. To be fair, Kimi K3 might have a perfectly fine output limit, and we just don't know it. And honestly, 65K output from Gemini 3.6 is solid but not unlimited either. The gap on input is 0, and the gap on output is really more about what Moonshot AI chose not to publish than any proven performance difference. I was expecting at least one of them to pull ahead here, but this test lands as a tie because Gemini 3.6 has a documented output cap, and Kimi K3 just doesn't say. And you can't plan around a number that doesn't exist, so one test in and we're tied. Test 2. Multilingual support. You ship a product to users in Spanish, Japanese, or Arabic, and the model just falls apart on the language. You get garbled output or flat-out refusals. And if you didn't check language coverage before you built, you're rebuilding from scratch. What surprised me is how one-sided the information is here. Gemini 3.6 has a documented 70+ languages pulled from Wikipedia and public sources, and Kimi K3 has no published figure, literally nothing. And I looked for it. I expected Kimi K3 to at least have a rough number somewhere, but it's a total black box on languages. So this one's also a tie, because Kimi K3 gave us nothing to compare, and 2 tests, and we're still tied across the board. Test 3, real-time information access and knowledge cutoff. This one's sneaky. You ask about something recent, like a product launch or a regulation change, and the model confidently gives you stale info from a year ago with no warning, and you might not catch it until a client does. So Gemini 3.6 has a training cutoff of March 2026 and always-on Google search baked in, which is a real documented verified capability, and Kimi K3 has no published cutoff and no mention of real-time search anywhere. So on screen, it's the same story. No published figure across the board for Kimi K3. I thought Kimi K3 would at least have a cutoff date listed somewhere, but there's nothing. So Gemini 3.6 has real-time search and a documented March 2026 cutoff, and Kimi K3 is completely silent. On this, and same story as before, we can't score what isn't published, so 3 tests in and still tied. Test 4, reasoning speed and latency. When speed is bad, your app feels sluggish, users drop off, and in real-time use cases like live chat or voice, even a half-second lag is noticeable. And if you're literally hammering a model with thousands of requests, slow tokens per second scales into real wait time and real user frustration. Gemini 3.6 Flash has a measured speed of 235.9 tokens per second pulled from artificial analysis, which is fast enough you'd feel it in a live app, and Kimi K3 has no published speed number anywhere, so on screen you've got Gemini 3.6 at 235.9 tokens per second and Kimi K3 just blank. I thought Kimi K3 would at least have community benchmarks floating around, but I couldn't find anything solid, so Gemini 3.6 is documented at 235.9 tokens per second, and Kimi K3 has no published figure, which means we can't call a winner, and 4 tests in, we're still tied across all of them. Test 5, API pricing and cost per token, and this one actually has numbers. The failure mode is straightforward. You pick the pricier model without realizing it, and at scale your token costs double. And if you're running millions of tokens a day, the wrong choice here is a real budget problem every single month. Okay, so this is where it gets concrete. Gemini 3.6 Flash is $1.50 per million input tokens and $7.50 per million output tokens, while Kimi K3 is 3.0 input and $15 output. And those Kimi numbers are community reported via OpenRouter, so take that with a grain of salt. But even so, on screen, Gemini 3.6 is half the price. I was expecting the gap to be smaller, but Gemini 3.6 is literally half the price on both input and output, which is not close at all, so Gemini 3.6 takes this one cleanly, and the final score is Gemini 3.61, Kimi K3 0, with 4 tests tied. Gemini 3.6 wins on 3 things specifically: pricing at $1.50 input, $7.50 output per million tokens, which is half what Kimi K3 costs; transparency with documented speed at 235.90 tokens per second plus 70 plus languages, and a March 2026 cutoff and a known 65K output cap, and real-time search baked right in, so you actually know what you're getting. And yeah, the hard truth is there are no evidence-backed wins for Kimi K3 right now. You can't point to a single verified number where Kimi K3 beats Gemini 3.6 because Moonshot AI hasn't published speed, languages, cutoff, or output limits. And that's a transparency problem, not necessarily a quality one. Honestly, I was expecting more of a real fight here, and what I got was Kimi K3 just not showing up with data. So here's the decision rule. If you need a documented, cost-efficient API, you can actually plan around, go Gemini 3.6, half the price. And if you're genuinely curious about Kimi K3 and want to test it yourself, go for it. But don't pay double blind.